is a right?
Hi, I'm Shelly Davies, and I'm the Senior Marketing and Outreach Manager for Preschool Promise. Preschool Promise started as a part of Learn To Earn with my friend Maya here, and we became our own separate entity in 2017. And our goal is for every Montgomery County child to be ready, school ready, day one. And how we do that is we have supports for families, we have supports for teachers, and we have supports for the children themselves to help them be successful. And equity is at the heart of everything that we do.
So my name is Maya Dorsey. I'm the Director of K12 Strategies at Learn To Earn Dayton. Just like Shelly said, our job is to take the good work that they've done early at the preschool level and take it through our milestones, our K12 milestones. And so we really focus on, K readiness and third grade reading and eighth grade math and all those different milestones along the way.
Article 26 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights discusses the right to education. What does the right to education mean to you?
When you look at that right, and it says that everyone's entitled to that right, and the education, it should be equal, it should be free, it should be available to everyone. It should be good quality, and it should be regardless of your economic status, of your ethnic background, any of those other determining factors. And I think that we all can realize that that's really isn't the case. Like, free and available to everyone is not also equal. That's where a lot of the inequities of education come into it. And they start right away. They start with availability for affordable and high quality preschool, which is part of the reason why Preschool Promise became who we are to begin with. In short, there's a lot of people who never attend preschool, and I always tell, anytime I talk about this, I always say that I didn't attend preschool, and on the first day of kindergarten I came home and I said, all those kids knew each other, and my mom said, preschool's for rich kids. And you think that it's really not, but for a lot of people, they either don't know how to access it or they have no way to pay for it. And daycare is expensive, childcare is expensive, and preschool is expensive for families. And so Preschool Promise is trying to initially eliminate that barrier and helping families pay for preschool and helping them find high quality preschool. And that was just the beginning of what we were looking at. So just to start, that's an inequity that continues and will continue.
Absolutely. The issue is that children should have the right to a public education regardless of, race, economic status, zip code. And so that's what we really focus on at Learn To Earn. We realize that, one of the things that we've said is that talent is everywhere, but opportunities are not. And so as a backbone organization, our focus is trying to figure out ways to provide those different resources and opportunities to support the 16 school districts here in the county in whatever way they need us to support, to really try to eradicate that data, right? So we just realize that kids can't help where they're born, they can't help where they live, so everybody has the right to a high quality education, every student. And so, our focus is making sure that not only do we get them ready to start school in kindergarten, but we want them to also graduate high school. We want them to go into career, go into workforce, and we want to make sure that those opportunities are possible. So, as a parent myself, I would say, 8 years ago, we decided to move from one community to another. And that was because every parent wants their children to have the best that they can provide. I have not met one parent who is like, no, I want my kid to have the worst. Every parent wants their child to have the best. It's just unfortunate that, the best isn't the standard everywhere. And so that's where we have work to do as a community to make sure that we eliminate those conditions that prevent students from having the best educational experience possible. Because those opportunities, just like for my own 2 children, I realized was not available in one school district. And so me being an educator, my husband and I, we had to make a decision to move our kids to a different community. And that's unfortunate because we liked the community that we lived in, but we realized that there was limitations. And so, when we say talent is everywhere, opportunities are not, that goes for my children too. I want my children to have the right to as many opportunities for them to be exposed, for them to not only have their own skills and talents nurtured, but think about things that maybe they haven't even considered. And so that's where we have to, as an education system, do better. You know, one of the things that Jeffrey Canada says is that, you know, education is a $1 billion industry. And it's the only industry that allows failure. You know, that's okay with failure. And so, you know, I see our job at Learn to Earn to try to help eliminate, raise awareness, advocate, so that we can really make sure the pathways for children are better.
Resources and equity.
I think the resources is an issue, right? So just like I cited, you know, for the school district that my children were in, you know, 8-9 years ago, they only had so many resources available. You see that with even like the arts. The arts is not available like it was when I was growing up in all schools, you know, because it's all about budgeting. It's about, you know, do we have the budget to have certain programs? So again, you can have a student who's musically inclined, you know, that cannot get that nurtured in their particular school. And so, I mean, that's a minor example of an inequity, but again, you know, depending on where schools are, you know, zip code wise, may also determine access, opportunities, exposure, field trips, all different types of things. But we know that the social economic gap is real, and we just continue to see it perpetuate. Right now, we know that around 62-63% of students in Montgomery County are third grade reading proficient. Why is that? That's not enough. We need to have 100% of students reading proficient. And so that proficiency should not be determined based off of where you live. It should not be determined based off the school you go to. Right now we see post-COVID that there are so many schools that don't have qualified teachers in the classroom, licensed teachers in the classroom. We see a lot of subs that are in the classrooms. And so again, when we talk about high quality, when we talk about opportunities, when we talk about, you know, making sure that students have what they need to be successful, those are some barriers. And, you know, unfortunately, a lot of times those barriers persist in certain economic areas, you know, that are to no fault of the children's, you know.
I totally agree with that. The resources, Maya and I were talking about that before we started. That's what we find with a lot of families as well, is that, and I totally and completely agree, is parents want to do the best for their children. So they are looking for them, and there's so much, it's very onerous on families to keep fighting for the resources that should be available for their children. And that's where there's a lot of advocacy that also goes into the work that we both do. And resources is part of that, because especially now in this post-pandemic world that we're living in. So when I'm looking at preschool again, these are the pandemic babies who are in preschool now, and there are not enough resources for the amount of need that these children have to be successful in preschool. And that is not just in the family child care, it's not in our community providers, it's also in the schools themselves. And so it's really difficult for parents to be able to navigate their way through knowing that their child needs some more resources so they can be successful, asking for those resources, and also sometimes hearing from schools, we don't have the availability to service your child for all of the resources that they need, and quite frankly that they're entitled to. That's part of the advocacy work that we do. I had mentioned equity before, and part of that equity is the equity of accessing, helping people know what their rights are and being able to access those rights. So a lot of what we do, I can speak for Preschool Promise, we have a lot of focus groups and a lot of family committees, parent-family voices. I run a parent advisory committee, and they tell us what it's like trying to navigate different parts of the school. And just recently, the conversation was about having children who have diagnoses, having children who are being referred to go through a diagnostic evaluation so that they qualify for services. And because of the limitations of staff, because of the limitations of resources of the schools, sometimes they can't even get that evaluation done. And they know my child does not have everything they need to be able to be successful. And so that really starts to, it's like a pebble into a classroom. So if you have a child who's not getting the resources they need to be successful, it also, the teachers then who are trying to accommodate that child the best they can, they often don't have the resources that they need. And so that just becomes a difficult situation for all the children in that classroom. And it's difficult because I think for a lot of families, they start to get disillusioned, and that's not the best way for them to then enter into the K12 school and think, well, it's too difficult. And sometimes parents harden themselves to it as well. They don't want to know that their child needs more things because they tried to access it before and they were unsuccessful. So that when I think about a lot of the advocacy work that we do, it has to do with resources. And the other part of it that I'll just bring up now is another part of equity that we talk about is racial equity, and particularly for our children of color and particularly for our Black boys. We've done a lot of work and a lot of listening of how to help the Black boys be successful, because they are only leading in preschool. They only lead when 1%, and it's expulsions. And it really has to do with how their behavior is perceived, and oftentimes implicit bias that teachers have, that quite frankly we all have, and sometimes we're not aware of it. The bias that they're bringing to that is making that behavior look worse than it is because of who is having that behavior. I would like to share something that came out of the committee to make preschool classrooms Black boy friendly, and it was a group of 15 men, leaders from around the city and county, Montgomery County and city of Dayton, and they came up with different recommendations of what that would look like moving forward. And one of the things that was determined, one of the phases, was to have site ambassadors. So they're called Black Boy Brilliance Site Ambassadors, and they are partnered with preschool classrooms, and we have providers that we partner with, and of those 122, there's different sites where somebody will partner, and it's putting an adult Black male into that classroom for several reasons. One, there's very few men in early childhood education, and two, there's even fewer men of color that are in early childhood education, and so it gives children an opportunity. What is familiar to you is no longer scary to you. And there's one gentleman in particular, he was one of the first ones that started. Today we had an annual luncheon where we shared information with holders and supporters of Preschool Promise, and he said, what I love about it is that they are seeing a Black man who is just somebody they might see at the store, or he comes in and he's taught them how to put a fish tank together. I'm not a celebrity, I'm not an athlete, this is who I am, and it's a really great environment for them to see. And there's 5 boys in that classroom, and even the teacher said, I've noticed how much they're talking to each other, because when Mr. Chris comes, they want to talk to him. And then the peer-to-peer conversations were going on as well. And it's just normalizing things that sometimes in our country are things that you don't necessarily have normalized for you, especially when things are put on social media and on regular media. So that has been part of the Black Boy Brains, has been really helpful for trying to right some of those inequities when it comes to race and how it is impacting our youngest learners, to help set them up for success so that when they get to kindergarten, they've been able to have that successful preschool experience and then continue on through their K12 career.
And at Learn to Earn, we want to be able to continue to sustain that impact. Again, we see on the Cradle to Career Continuum, we see that Preschool Promise is on the front end of that, from birth through preschool up into kindergarten, and then we see us as, taking that and trying to continue to support the students down that milestone all the way through, graduation, career, going to college, whatever they decide. And so that work that they do is very important. So we really are partners. Sometimes people probably, I know for me, they interchange Preschool Promise and Learn to Earn together because we were together at one point. But I see us still as a collaborative partner and a necessity to one another's work. So it's really great to have that collaboration and really respect the work that's being done.
Because it's going to continue there. If you look at the success, the percentage of children who attended preschool, the percentage of children who passed the 3rd grade reading proficiency, the percentage of children who graduate from high school, the percentage of children who go on to college, it's the same percentage. It's that it follows through.
Yes.
And something you had asked earlier was, what does that look like on the state level? I think it's challenging. I think that the governor, he talks about how important it is that we need to fund our early childhood education. We need to fund our people who are providing child care. And I don't doubt that he feels strongly about that. But then as it goes through, what does that look like when we get down to the dollars and cents of it? It doesn't equal. And so that, again, is where that advocacy comes. And it's important for people, when you talk about how can people support, how can they be a part of this, is that I think it's always important for us all to remember that the elected officials do work for us. And it's important to say, this is something that is important to my family, it's important to my community in which I live. And just don't let off that pressure on them to keep it in front of them.
And families have the power. Parents have the power, right? And so as they come together and they really understand the importance of the why, then they can advocate. I think there's power in that. Imagine going to the State House and it's parents that's up there that's leading the charge and saying, we want this, we want change. If it's parents going into the school board meetings collectively to say, these are the things that we want for our children, there's power in that. And so the more that we can, again, support families to understand the importance and the significance of advocacy, I think the more gains we can make in terms of student achievement.
Advocacy.
So, just piggybacking off of that, when you talk about advocacy is very, very important. It's important because, when I was in school many years ago, when I was in elementary school many years ago, it was kind of like felt by parents, I send my kids to school, they'll get an education, they're going to do what my kid needs to teach them what they need to learn, and then my kid comes home. But we're in a different day. We're in a different day, which means that it is everyone's responsibility. We have to be all hands on deck. And parents don't know what they don't know, and so we make assumptions too in the education space that parents should know certain things. They should know, about chronic absenteeism. They should know, to send their kids to preschool. They should know, about the KRA for kindergarten readiness and begin to teach them the different developmental things they need to be prepared for kindergarten. So when you talk about advocacy, it's important for us, in this space to also lift that idea up of let me help inform you so that if you know better, then you're going to be able to use that knowledge and that awareness to support your children. And so the focus groups, we've done that at Learn to Earn. We have focused on place-based work in the last couple of years, which is Northwest Dayton partnership. But in that, we hear that same feedback. Well, I didn't know, I didn't know, that suspension led up to, these outcomes. I didn't know if my child missed, 1 day a month that is going to lead up to these. They don't know. And so I think the more that we can inform and we can collaborate and be in partnership with families and really recognize that this is a community work. This is not just on educators to educate our kids and that's it. I think COVID definitely disrupted that whole idea, because now the gaps are so wide academically that it's going to take more than you going to school 5 days a week to close that gap. It takes for parents to understand, okay, these are the things that my student needs to know. It takes parents to understand when they take tests, Why is that important? We tell parents, read to your child every night. Well, read what, right? Why do I have to read 20 minutes? What is it going to do? Or we tell parents, to make sure your child gets sleep before they take a test, or make sure they go to bed early. But then we don't know how to necessarily read the test. They don't know how to interpret the test. So the paper comes home, it comes in an email, you're like, oh, great. I see a number, I see this. But I don't know what that means when you say what my child's percentile is in reading or math. And so I think that education and that advocacy piece, and also informing our families on what the policies are. Election time comes and all these different ballots and stuff are up, and parents are asked to vote yes or no on certain issues, but they don't really understand what those implications mean for their children. So I think we have to do a better job as a community of informing the families so that they can really make authentic decisions, but also be in partnership with the people who are trying to serve them and serve their children.
When is the right time to start thinking about preschool?
It starts at birth. Parents are the first teachers for their children. And sometimes parents don't know, when does preschool start? When should I start looking for it? And a good resource is a pediatrician. Another good resource is other benefits that you might have. If you're working with Help Me Grow, or if you go to libraries, we tend to put information for people in all the places where families might be. So they're at health centers, they're at libraries, we go to food banks, we go to parks, we interact with people at splash pads, and start that conversation. And a lot of times people say, oh, I haven't even thought about it. When should I be thinking about preschool? How old is your baby? She's 3. Perfect. This is the time to start thinking about it. But prior to that, it's just connecting them with ideas of read to your baby. That's a great thing to do. Interacting with other kids, having free things that are available all across the city are a good place for that learning, because learning for youngest children also starts with play. It looks like play.
And sometimes you don't know where to go. You don't know these resources exist. I would say since I've come to Learn to Earn, I've learned so much that I'm like, had I known this when my children were younger, they could have had an even better start, right? I did the best I could with what I knew. But parents don't always know where to go. So even calling the school district and saying, hey, when does preschool start? When does kindergarten? What should I be doing? The school can guide you and say, okay, call, like she said, Help Me Grow, call Preschool Promise, or call. And so I think if parents absolutely don't know, then you can still call the school district and they will point you in the right direction. But a lot of times, parents just don't know. They don't know. It's like, maybe they had a conversation with someone and said, oh, my child is in preschool. Oh, yeah, where? And then from there, you pick up the phone and you call and you say, okay, well, can my child sign up? Oh, well, they need to do these things first. So I think, it's also, as Shelly said, being in the environment, having play dates with kids and talking to other parents, and because you don't know. Things are different now than they were when I was growing up. Things are going to be different in 20 years when my kids are having kids, right? And so the more that we create this community of support and a safe environment where we can ask the questions, and I think the school wants that. They want children to come sooner. They want to provide those interventions as early as possible. So I would say at the very least, if you don't know where to start, call your local school district and ask them to point you in the right direction.
Are there any resources for low-income parents?
There are a few things. So if you have a child or a parent who's not working, or if they have little to no income, Head Start is a good place for those children to be, and Head Start in Dayton is called a BCDC. And that can start. There are infant and toddler locations there, and they provide transportation. They are a good catch for families who possibly there's not a lot of a good variety of choices for them. And then as you go from there, there's publicly funded childcare if parents are working and they need something that kind of mirrors more like a childcare setting, but they also want that preschool component of it. The publicly funded childcare helps pay for that, but doesn't pay for everything. There's a copay, and that's where Preschool Promise comes in. If a parent is publicly funded childcare, we help by paying their copay. And then you have the parents who, we have this conversation all the time, I make too much, I don't qualify for anything, I don't have anything extra to pay for preschool. And that is a part of Preschool Promise that's been there from the beginning, that there's tuition assistance. It's based on family size, it's based on their income, and everybody qualifies for it. And that does help that final barrier for people finding somewhere.
Final takeaways.
It is your absolute right to get the best education possible. And so continue to advocate for it, ask the tough questions, stand up for your children. I think that's the best thing. And like Shelly said, it starts at birth. It's never too late. You have an opportunity all the way through 12th grade to figure it out. And I think sometimes parents get discouraged. But ask the questions, advocate for your children.
And also, if it doesn't seem right, there's a reason. And the other thing I would say about that is, you know your child better than anybody else does. And so if you're thinking, I just don't think that my child is getting everything that they need to be successful, push.
And sometimes the kids will tell you, right? So believe them.
So we'll end with, I think we're all in agreement that education is a human right.
Absolutely.
We thank you for coming and we appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.